Clara Whitmore dropped to her knees in the snow and pressed her forehead against the frozen ground. "God," she whispered, "if you're listening, my children are starving." Behind her, 5-year-old Ellie stood shivering in a coat 3 sizes too big. Her brother Tommy, just 8 years old, held his sister's hand and watched their mother break. 3 days, no food, no help coming. And somewhere on that empty winter road, a lone cowboy on a pale horse was riding toward a choice that would change everything. If you want to see how this story ends, subscribe now and follow along. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Bitter Creek Ranch, Montana Territory. December 1883. Clara pushed herself up from the frozen ground. Her hands were raw. Her knees ached, but she couldn't let the children see her like this. "Mama!" Ellie's small voice cut through the wind. Clara wiped her face fast and turned around. "I'm all right, baby. Just checking the ground for frozen carrots." Tommy didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, those serious, too old eyes that had watched his father die in this same yard 2 winters ago. "There ain't no carrots, Mama," Tommy said quietly. "Ground's been frozen since November." Clara walked to them and pulled both children against her sides. "Let's get inside. Wind's picking up." The cabin door groaned when she pushed it open. Inside wasn't much warmer than outside. The fire had died down to embers, and she had maybe enough wood for one more night. Ellie climbed onto the bed and pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. "Mama, my belly hurts." "I know, sweetheart." "Is it gonna hurt tomorrow too?" Clara couldn't answer. She busied herself at the cold stove, pretending to look for something that wasn't there. Tommy sat on the floor near his sister's bed. He pulled out a worn deck of cards, the only thing left from his father, and started building a little house with them. "Mama," he said without looking up, "Mr. Crawford came by again yesterday, when you were at the well." Clara's hands stopped moving. "What did he say?" "Said we got 12 days left. Said if you was smart you'd take his offer." "And what did you tell him?" Tommy looked up. His jaw was set hard for an 8-year-old. "Told him my mama ain't for sale, and neither is our land." Clara crossed the room and knelt beside her son. She cupped his face in her cold hands. "Thomas James Whitmore, you are your father's son." "I know, Mama. And that mouth of yours is gonna get you in trouble one day." Tommy almost smiled. "Papa always said trouble finds Whitmores whether we go looking or not." The wind slammed against the cabin wall, and Ellie whimpered. Clara stood. "I'm going to check the barn. See if Bess left any milk." "She ain't had milk in 2 weeks, Mama." "Then I'll check anyway." She grabbed her coat, more patches than fabric now, and stepped back into the cold. Tate. The barn leaned hard to the east like it was tired of standing. Inside old Bess, the cow stood in the corner, ribs showing through her dull hide. She turned her head when Clara entered but didn't move. "Hey, girl," Clara whispered. "Anything for me today?" She checked. "Nothing." Clara leaned her forehead against the cow's warm side and closed her eyes. "Thomas," she said to the empty barn, to her dead husband, to the ghost of everything they'd built together. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." The wind answered with a long, low howl. Then, something else. Hoofbeats. Clara's head snapped up. She moved to the barn door and peered through the gap. A rider was coming down the road, moving slow. A pale horse, almost white, stepping careful through the snow. The man on its back sat tall, shoulders hunched against the cold hat pulled low. Strangers on this road meant one of 2 things: trouble from Crawford's men or drifters looking for easy pickings. Clara reached for the pitchfork, leaning against the wall. The rider stopped at the gate. He didn't call out, didn't wave, just sat there looking at the ranch like he was deciding something. Clara stepped out of the barn, pitchfork in hand. "That's close enough, mister." The man tilted his head slightly. Didn't speak. I said that's close enough. I heard you, ma'am. His voice was low. Rough, like he hadn't used it in days, maybe weeks. Then state your business or keep writing. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he lifted one gloved hand and pointed toward the barn roof. Your roof's got a hole the size of a wagon wheel. You know that. Clara's grip tightened on the pitchfork. I know what's wrong with my own property. Wasn't criticizing, just observing. He lowered his hand. I could fix it. If you got tools. I don't need charity. Didn't offer charity. He shifted in the saddle. I'm looking for work. A meal. A place to sleep that ain't frozen ground. You got any of those things, I'll earn 'em. Clara studied him. Couldn't see much of his face under that hat brim, but his hands looked rough and capable. His horse was thin, but well cared for, and there was something in the way he sat still patient, like a man who had learned to wait for things. I ain't got money to pay you, she said. Didn't ask for money. I barely got food for my own children. Then I'll eat less. The cabin door creaked open. Clara turned her head and saw Tommy step out onto the porch, his father's old rifle in his hands. The thing was nearly as tall as he was. Tommy, get back inside. Who's he, Mama? Nobody. Go inside. Tommy didn't move. He raised the rifle awkward too heavy for him and pointed it at the stranger. Mister, you better not hurt my mama. The rider didn't flinch. Didn't reach for anything. He just looked at the boy with an expression Clara couldn't read. I ain't here to hurt anybody, son. I ain't your son. No. I reckon you ain't. The man's voice shifted, softer now. But you're holding that rifle wrong. Your left hand should be further up the stock, and you're shaking. That'll throw your aim. Tommy blinked. His grip adjusted slightly, almost on instinct. That's better, the stranger said. Your paw teach you to shoot. My paw's dead. Silence. The wind blew snow across the yard. I'm sorry to hear that, the stranger said finally. And something in his voice made Clara believe he meant it. The cabin door opened again. This time, Ellie appeared barefoot, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, face pale from hunger. Mama! Mama! Who's the man on the pretty horse? Clara moved fast, putting herself between her daughter and the stranger. Ellie, you get back inside right now. Where are your shoes? I couldn't find them. I put them by the stove to warm. Go find them. But Ellie didn't move. She was staring at the stranger with wide, curious eyes. Mister, she said, her small voice carrying across the yard. Are you Santa Claus? Clara closed her eyes. Ellie, you got a white horse. Santa's got reindeer, but maybe he uses a horse when the reindeer are tired. The stranger was quiet. Then slowly he reached up and removed his hat. His face was weathered, worn. Dark eyes set deep above sharp cheekbones. A jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked like a man who'd seen too many miles and not enough kindness. But when he looked at Ellie, something in those hard eyes gentled. No, little miss, he said quietly. I ain't Santa. Ellie's face fell. Oh. But I once knew a man who dressed up like Santa every year for his boy. Made the suit himself. Big red coat, cotton beard, bells on his boots. What happened to him? The stranger put his hat back on. That's a long story. I like long stories. Ellie. Clara's voice was sharp. Inside. Now. Ellie's lip trembled, but she turned and shuffled back toward the door. Tommy stood firm on the porch, rifle still raised. Clara looked at the stranger. Mister, I appreciate you stopping. But we got nothing to offer you, and I got enough trouble without adding more. What kind of trouble? The kind that ain't your concern. The stranger nodded slowly. He gathered his reins like he was about to leave. Then he stopped. That man you mentioned, Crawford. He the one causing trouble. Clara's blood went cold. How do you know that name? Boy mentioned it. Back when you were in the barn. She shot a look at Tommy. He had the decency to look guilty. "It ain't your business," Clara said again. "No, ma'am, it ain't." The stranger turned his horse slightly. "But I passed through Elkhorn 2 days back. Heard talk about a widow out at Bitter Creek. Heard some men laughing about how she'd be off her land by New Year." He looked at her. "That you—" Clara didn't answer. Her silence was answer enough. 12 days, the stranger said. "That's what you got, ain't it? 12 days to pay off whatever he's holding over you, or you lose everything? Like I said, ain't your concern." "No." He looked at the sagging barn, the broken fence, the cabin with smoke barely rising from the chimney. "But I've got nowhere to be, and I've fixed worse than this. Why would you help us? You don't know us." The stranger was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I had a family once. A place like this. Wooden roof, crooked fence, a porch that creaked when you stepped on it wrong." His voice dropped. "And I wasn't there when they needed me most." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but something close to recognition. "What's your name?" she asked. "Brennan, Josiah Brennan. Most folks call me Joe." "I'm Clara Whitmore. That's my son Tommy, and my daughter Ellie." Joe touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am." "I can't pay you, Mr. Brennan." "I told you. I don't want pay." "Then what do you want?" He looked at her, looked at the children, looked at the broken ranch slowly dying in the Montana winter. "A reason to stay," he said quietly. "Just for a while." Tommy didn't lower the rifle until his mother told him to. Even then, he kept his eyes on the stranger as the man dismounted and led his horse toward the barn. "I don't trust him, Mama," Tommy said. "Neither do I." "Then why'd you let him stay?" Clara watched Joe Brennan disappear into the barn. "Because we're out of choices, Tommy, and sometimes a stranger is all God sends." "What if God didn't send him? What if Crawford did?" Clara put her hand on her son's shoulder. "Then we'll find out soon enough." Good. Inside the cabin, Ellie was back on the bed shoes now on her feet, blanket pulled tight. "Mama, is the man going to fix our house?" "Maybe." "Is he going to eat all our food?" Clara almost laughed. "Almost." "We don't have any food, baby." "I know." Ellie's voice was small. "My belly told me." Clara knelt beside the bed. "Listen to me. I'm going to figure this out. I always figure it out." "I know, Mama. And Tommy's going to protect us. And soon it'll be Christmas," Ellie interrupted. "And Santa will bring us food and presents and a new coat for Tommy because his is too small." Clara's throat tightened. "We'll see, sweetheart." "Mama." "Yes." "I don't really think that man is Santa." No, but he's got sad eyes, like he lost something." Ellie tilted her head. "Maybe if we're nice to him, he won't be so sad." Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. "Maybe so." Joe spent the first hour in the barn, checking the structure, testing the beams, making a mental list of everything that needed repair. It was a long list. The cow watched him with tired eyes. He found an old bucket, filled it with snow, and set it near her. "You need water, old girl, and feed, neither of which I got." He patted her side. "But we'll figure it out." He heard footsteps outside. Small ones. A moment later, a face appeared in the barn doorway. Ellie still bundled in her blanket shoes, too big for her feet. "You're not supposed to be out here," Joe said. "I know. Your mama know where you are. She's sleeping. She sleeps a lot now. Tommy says it's because she's tired from worrying." Joe didn't know what to say to that. Ellie stepped into the barn. "What's your horse's name?" "Ghost." "That's a scary name." "He ain't scary. He's just white." Ellie walked closer to the horse, reached up to touch his nose. Ghost dipped his head, patient, gentle. He's soft, Ellie said. He's old. Old horses get soft. Are you old? Joe almost smiled. Some days. Ellie turned to look at him. Her face was serious for a child her age. Mr. Joe. Yes. Are you going to stay? He was quiet for a moment. For a while. How long is a while? I don't know yet. Ellie nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. My papa stayed forever, until he got sick. Then he went to heaven. Joe felt his chest tighten. I'm sorry about your papa. It's okay. Tommy remembers him better than me. I was real little. She looked down at her two big shoes. Tommy says papa was brave and strong, and he never let anyone push us around. Sounds like a good man. He was. Ellie looked back up at Joe. Mama cries at night sometimes, when she thinks we're sleeping, but I hear her. Joe didn't speak. He couldn't. Mr. Joe. Yeah. If you stay, can you make Mama stop crying? The question hit him like a fist to the chest. He knelt down, bringing himself to the girl's eye level. Up close, he could see how thin she was, how pale, how her eyes were too big in her small face. I don't know if I can do that, he said honestly. But I can try to help, fix things, make life a little easier. That's what Santa does, Ellie said. Makes things easier. I told you, I ain't Santa. I know. She smiled, a tiny, fragile thing. But maybe you're close enough. Before Joe could respond, Ellie turned and shuffled back toward the cabin blanket trailing in the snow behind her. Joe stayed kneeling in the cold barn watching her go. And somewhere deep inside him, in a place he'd locked away years ago, something cracked open. That night, Joe slept in the barn. He'd offered to stay outside in the lean-to with his horse, but the barn was warmer, and Clara had insisted. Not out of kindness, he could see that, but out of practicality. A frozen drifter was no use to anyone. He lay in the straw coat, pulled tight hat over his face, and tried to sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. Sarah. Daniel. The house in Kansas with the creaking porch. The smoke rising where there shouldn't have been smoke. The screaming he heard in his dreams but never in reality, because by the time he'd gotten there was nothing left to scream. 8 years. 8 years of riding. Running. Moving from town to town, job to job, never staying long enough for anyone to know his name. And now, here he was, on another broken ranch, with another widow, with children who looked at him with two big eyes and asked if he was Santa Claus. God had a cruel sense of humor. Or maybe God had nothing to do with it. Charta. Sunrise came gray and cold. Joe was already up, already working. He'd found some tools in the barn, old rusted but usable, and had started on the fence by the time Clara came outside. She stopped on the porch and watched him for a moment. You're still here, she said. Said I would be. Men say a lot of things. Joe didn't respond. He just kept working. Clara walked toward him, arms crossed against the cold. There's coffee. It's weak and probably tastes like mud, but it's hot. Thank you, ma'am. You can drop the ma'am. Makes me feel old. Yes, ma'am. He caught himself. Sorry. Habit. Clara almost smiled. Almost. She stood there watching him work. He was efficient, focused. Each movement had purpose. Where'd you learn to fix things? She asked. Everywhere, nowhere. He straightened a post, tested it. Worked a lot of ranches, picked things up. You said you had a family, before. Joe's hands stilled for just a moment. Then he continued working. I did. What happened? He was quiet for a long time. Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, Fire. I wasn't home. When I came back. He took a breath. There was nothing to come back to. Clara felt the weight of those words settle over her. "I'm sorry," she said. "It was a long time ago." "That doesn't make it hurt less." Joe looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time, without the distance he usually kept. "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." They stood there in the cold morning light, two broken people on a broken ranch with nothing between them but snow and silence and the ghosts they both carried. Then Ellie's voice came from the cabin. "Mama Tommy's being mean," and just like that the moment passed. Clara sighed. "Duty calls." "Go on," Joe said. "I'll keep working." She started toward the house, then stopped. Turned back. "Mr. Brennan." "Joe." "Joe." She hesitated. "Thank you. For staying." He touched the brim of his hat. "Thank you for letting me." By midday, Joe had fixed 3 fence posts, patched a hole in the barn wall, and cleared the ice from the well pump so it would work again. Tommy watched him from a distance, suspicious but curious despite himself. Finally, the boy walked over. "You know how to use an axe?" Tommy asked. "I do." "We need firewood. Mama's been using the old furniture, but we're almost out." Joe looked at the tree line beyond the property. "That dead oak over there. That'd give you enough to last a while." "It's too far. Mama won't let me go that far alone." "Then we'll go together." Joe set down his hammer. "If your mama says it's okay." Tommy considered this. Then he nodded and ran toward the cabin. 10 minutes later, they were walking toward the tree-line Joe, with the axe Tommy with a rope to drag the wood back. They worked in silence for a while. Joe chopped. Tommy gathered. Then Tommy said, "You really lost your family." Joe's axe paused mid-swing. "I heard you talking to Mama," Tommy admitted. "I wasn't supposed to listen, but I did." Joe lowered the axe. "Yeah, I really did." "How?" "Fire. Bad men came to our house while I was away. When I got back." He didn't finish. Tommy was quiet. Then he said, "I was there when Papa died. He got sick. Real sick. Couldn't breathe. I held his hand at the end." Joe looked at the boy, 8 years old, carrying a weight no child should carry. "That was brave of you," Joe said. "Didn't feel brave. Felt scared." "Being brave and being scared ain't opposites, son. They go together. You can't be brave unless you're scared first." Tommy thought about that. Then he nodded. "Can you teach me to shoot proper like you said yesterday, with my hand in the right place?" "If your mama says it's okay." "She'll say it's okay. She wants me to be able to protect us." "Then yeah, I'll teach you." Tommy almost smiled. First time Joe had seen anything close to a smile on the boy's face. They went back to work. That evening they ate together in the cabin. It wasn't much. Weak broth made from the last of Clara's dried beans. A half-stale biscuit split 4 ways. But they sat around the small table like a family, and the cabin felt warmer than it had in months. Ellie chattered about the horse, about the snow, about Christmas, which was only 11 days away. "I asked Santa for 3 things," she announced. "A new dress, a real supper, and for the sad man to smile." Joe nearly choked on his broth. "Ellie," Clara said gently, "that's not polite." "But it's true, he's got sad eyes. I want him to have happy eyes." Joe set down his spoon. He looked at the little girl with her 2 big eyes and her fierce, stubborn hope. "You know what?" he said quietly. "I think I can work on that." Ellie beamed, and somewhere deep in the hollow of his chest, Joe felt something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Warmth. Later, after the children were asleep, Clara stood on the porch looking at the stars. Joe found her there. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "Clear night," he said. "Cold, too. They stood in silence. Then Clara said, "I don't know if I can save this place." Crawford. "He owns the bank. He owns the sheriff. He owns half this town. My husband borrowed money from him when times got hard. After Thomas died, Crawford doubled the interest, then tripled it. Now I owe $200 and I don't have 20. And if you don't pay, he takes the ranch, takes everything." Clara's voice cracked. "My husband is buried here. This is my children's home. And that man is going to take it all because he can." Joe was quiet. Then he said, "What if you had help?" "What kind of help?" "The kind that doesn't give up easy." Clara looked at him. "Why, Joe? Why do you care? You don't know us. You could ride out tomorrow, find easier work somewhere else. Why stay here?" Joe looked at the stars, at the snow, at the little ranch that reminded him so much of what he'd lost. "Because I've spent 8 years running," he said quietly. "And I'm tired. Because those kids in there look at me like I'm something worth believing in. And because you—" He stopped. "Because I what?" He turned to face her. "Because you're still standing, after everything. You're still fighting, and I ain't met anyone worth fighting for in a long, long time." Clara's breath caught. She didn't speak, couldn't. But something passed between them in that cold Montana night, something fragile, something new. "I'm not Santa Claus," Joe said, "but maybe I can help, if you'll let me." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, 11 days. 11 days. If you're going to stay, then you better come inside before you freeze." Joe touched the brim of his hat. "Yes, ma'am." He saw the corner of her mouth lift, and for the first time, Joe Brennan allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd found a place worth staying for. The next morning came fast and mean wind rattling the cabin walls like something trying to get in. Joe was already up. He'd barely slept too many ghosts, too many memories stirred up by that conversation on the porch. But work was the only cure he'd ever found for a restless mind. So he worked. By the time Clara stepped outside, he'd split enough wood to last a week. She stopped short when she saw the pile. "You did all that this morning. Couldn't sleep. That makes 2 of us." She pulled her shawl tighter. "Coffee's on, if you want." "I'll take it." They walked inside together. Tommy was already awake, sitting at the table with his father's cards spread out in some game only he understood. Ellie was still curled under the blankets, one arm wrapped around a cornhusk doll that had seen better days. Clara poured coffee into a chipped cup and handed it to Joe. Their fingers brushed for just a moment. Neither mentioned it. "I need to go into town today," Clara said. Joe's hand paused halfway to his mouth. "That a good idea?" "No, but I need supplies, and I need to talk to Silas Crawford. Talk to him about what? Buying time." She set the pot down hard. "If I can get him to extend the deadline even a few weeks, maybe I can figure something out. Sell the cow, take in washing, something." "That man doesn't strike me as the extending type." "He isn't, but I have to try." Tommy looked up from his cards. "I'm coming with you." "No, you're not." "Mama." "Tommy, I said no. You're staying here with your sister." "I can protect you." "I don't need protecting. I need you here watching Ellie. Can you do that for me?" Tommy's jaw tightened. He looked at Joe, then back at his mother. "Fine." Clara turned to Joe. "Will you stay watch the place while I'm gone?" "I'll do better than that. I'll come with you." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not, but I'm coming anyway." Joe set down his cup. "A woman alone in a town like that dealing with a man like Crawford, you need someone watching your back. And you think you're that someone. I think I'm all you've got." Clara wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes, but she didn't. "Fine," she said. "Tommy, you're in charge. Lock the door. Don't let anyone in, and don't you dare touch that rifle unless there's real trouble." "I know, Mama." "Ellie, baby, wake up." Clara crossed to the bed and gently shook her daughter. "Mama's got to go to town. You be good for Tommy." Ellie's eyes fluttered open. Can I come? Not today, sweetheart. But I want to see the pretty stores. Next time, I promise. Ellie's face fell, but she nodded. Then her eyes moved to Joe, who was pulling on his coat by the door. Mr. Joe. Yeah. Don't let the bad men hurt my mama. Joe felt that hit him square in the chest. He walked over, knelt beside the bed, and looked the little girl right in the eyes. I won't, he said. I promise. Ellie reached out and touched his face with her small cold hand. You got scratchy cheeks. Haven't shaved in a while. I like it. It's like a bear. She giggled. You're a nice bear. Joe didn't know what to say to that, so he just touched the top of her head, stood up, and headed for the door. Clara was already outside saddling the old horse. Joe led Ghost out of the barn and mounted up. They rode out together as the sun climbed over the frozen hills. Neither spoke for the first mile. The cold was too sharp, the wind too loud. But Joe kept watching her from the corner of his eye. The way she sat straight in the saddle despite everything. The way her hands stayed steady on the reins, even though she had to be scared. You do this ride often? He finally asked. When I have to. Usually takes half the day there and back. Alone. Thomas used to come with me, before. Joe nodded. He didn't push. Another mile passed. Then Clara said, He was a good man. Thomas. Better than I deserved. I doubt that. You didn't know him. No, but I know you. What I've seen. And a woman like you doesn't end up with someone who doesn't measure up. Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, He used to say I was the strongest person he'd ever met. Said I could bend without breaking. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I think I'm about to break Joe. You won't. How do you know? Because your kids are watching, and mothers don't break when their kids are watching. Clara turned to look at him. Something in her expression shifted, softened. You sound like you know something about that. Joe's jaw tightened. My mother was the same way. Kept us fed during the worst years. Kept us believing things would get better even when they didn't. What happened to her? Fever. Took her when I was 15. I'm sorry. Don't be. She lived long enough to see me grown. That was more than some got. They rode on. Elkhorn appeared on the horizon like a wound on the land, a cluster of buildings huddled together against the cold smoke rising from chimneys, horses tied to posts, people moving through the streets with their heads down. Joe felt Clara tense beside him. It'll be fine, he said. You don't know that. No, but I'll make sure of it. They hitched their horses outside the general store and walked in together. The store was warm, cramped, filled with the smell of tobacco and old leather. A woman behind the counter looked up when they entered. Her eyes moved from Clara to Joe and back again. Mrs. Whitmore? She said, her voice flat. Didn't expect to see you today. Mrs. Garrett, I need a few things. I'm sure you do. The woman's eyes flicked to Joe again. Who's this? A friend. A friend. Mrs. Garrett's mouth twisted. I didn't know you were in the habit of making friends with strange men. Joe stepped forward, but Clara put a hand on his arm. Just the supplies, Mrs. Garrett. Flour, salt, and whatever beans you have. And how will you be paying? Clara's face went pale. I have a little money. A little won't cover what you already owe. I know. I'll pay the rest, soon. That's what you said last month. Mrs. Garrett leaned on the counter. Some of us are starting to wonder if you're good for it at all. Joe felt his hands clench into fists. He forced them to relax. She's good for it, he said quietly. Mrs. Garrett looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. And who are you to speak for her? Someone who doesn't like the way you're talking. Is that a threat? No, ma'am, just an observation. The door behind them opened. Cold air swept in, along with heavy footsteps. Well, well, a man's voice said. Clara Whitmore. I was hoping I'd run into you today. Joe turned. The man walking toward them was big, not tall, but thick. Broad shoulders, heavy gut, a face like a bulldog that had learned to smile. He wore a wool coat that cost more than everything in this store combined, and his boots were polished to a shine that didn't belong in Montana winter. Silas Crawford. Joe knew the type. Had met 100 men like him in 100 towns. Men who smiled while they took everything you had. Mr. Crawford, Clara said. Her voice was steady, but Joe could see her hands shaking. I was just telling Mr. Carter here that I expected you'd be coming to see me soon. Crawford smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. After all, we have business to discuss. I was hoping we could talk about the deadline. What about it? I need more time. Crawford laughed. It was an ugly sound. More time. Of course you do. He moved closer, and Joe stepped between them without thinking. Crawford's eyes narrowed. And who might you be? Nobody. Nobody with the name Brennan. Brennan. Crawford rolled the name around like he was tasting it. I don't know any Brennans. That's because I just got here. Is that so? Crawford looked past Joe to Clara. You hiring drifters now. Things must be even worse than I thought. He's helping with repairs, Clara said. Repairs, how noble. Crawford smiled again. Well, Mr. Brennan, I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. This woman owes me $200. She's got 10 days to pay, and if she can't... He shrugged. Well, I'll be taking possession of that pretty little ranch of hers. The ranch was her husband's, Joe said. And her husband borrowed money from me. Money he never paid back. Now it's her debt. What was the original amount? Crawford's smile flickered. That's not your concern. I'm curious. $80. 3 years ago. Interest accumulates, Mr. Brennan. That's how business works. Joe did the math in his head. 80 to 200 in 3 years. That's not interest. That's robbery. The store went quiet. Mrs. Garrett drew back behind the counter. The other customers pretended to be very interested in the merchandise. Crawford's face went red. You have a lot of nerve. No, sir. I just have eyes. Joe kept his voice calm level. I've seen men like you before. You prey on widows, on orphans, on people who can't fight back. You call it business. I call it what it is. And what's that? Sin. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Crawford stared at Joe for a long moment. Then he laughed a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the walls. You're going to regret that, he said quietly. Both of you. He turned to Clara. 10 days, Mrs. Whitmore. Not 11, not 12. 10. And when you can't pay, and you won't, I'll take everything. The land. The house. That pathetic barn your husband built with his own hands. He leaned closer. And maybe I'll let you stay, as the help. Joe moved forward, but Clara grabbed his arm and held tight. Don't, she whispered. He wants you to hit him. He's got the sheriff in his pocket. You'll end up in jail and I'll be alone. Joe stopped. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to act. But he didn't. Crawford saw the struggle and smiled. Smart woman. Smarter than her husband ever was. He tipped his hat. I'll be seeing you. He walked out of the store. The door slammed behind him. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Mrs. Garrett cleared her throat. I think you should leave, Mrs. Whitmore. You're making the other customers uncomfortable. Clara's face flushed with humiliation. She turned toward the door, but Joe put a hand on her shoulder. We came for supplies, he said. We're not leaving without them. She can't pay. Joe reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He dropped it on the counter. Coins rattled inside. That cover it. Mrs. Garrett's eyes went wide. She opened the pouch, counted quickly. Her expression shifted from contempt to surprise to something that looked almost like shame. "Yes," she said quietly. "That'll cover it." "Then get the supplies." She moved quickly. Flour, salt beans, a slab of salt pork, a small bag of sugar. She packed everything into a canvas sack and pushed it across the counter. Joe took it, nodded once, and walked out with Clara beside him. Outside, Clara stopped. "Where did you get that money?" "Had it. Savings from the last few jobs." "That was supposed to be for you." "It was. Now it's for you." "Joe, I can't." "You can, and you will. Now let's get out of here before I do something I regret." They rode out of Elkhorn with the supplies strapped to Clara's saddle. Neither looked back. Halfway home, Clara pulled her horse to a stop. Joe stopped beside her. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why are you doing this? The work, the money, standing up to Crawford. Why?" Joe was quiet for a long moment. The wind blew snow across the trail. "8 years ago," he said, "I came home to ashes. My wife, my son, everything I loved, gone." He took a breath. "I spent a long time blaming myself. Spent longer trying to outrun it. Couldn't." Clara waited. "Then I rode past your ranch," Joe continued. "Saw your daughter standing at the fence. Saw your son with his father's rifle. Saw you fighting. For your family. For something worth keeping." He looked at her. "And I thought maybe this is why I'm still here. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do." "You barely know us." "I know enough." He nudged Ghost forward. "I know you need help. And I know I need a reason to stay. Seems like we both got something to offer." Clara didn't answer, but she fell into step beside him and they rode on together. When they got back to the ranch, Tommy was waiting on the porch with the rifle across his knees. His face was pale. "Mama," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Men came." Clara was off her horse before it stopped moving. "What men? What happened?" "2 of them. They said Crawford sent them. Said it was a warning." Joe's blood went cold. "Where's Ellie?" "Inside. She's okay. I made her hide." Clara ran into the cabin. Joe heard her cry out. He followed. The inside of the cabin had been torn apart. The table was overturned. The blankets ripped from the bed. Clara's few possessions were scattered across the floor. And on the wall, carved deep into the wood, were 3 words: "Pay or leave." Clara stood in the middle of the destruction, hands pressed to her mouth. Ellie ran to her from the corner where she'd been hiding, and Clara gathered her daughter into her arms. "Mama, I was scared," Ellie sobbed. "They were loud. They said bad words." "I know, baby, I know." Tommy came in behind Joe. His hands were still shaking. "I wanted to shoot them, but they were too fast. They were in and out before I could." "You did right," Joe said. "You protected your sister. That's what matters." "They'll come back," Tommy said. "Won't they?" Joe looked at the words carved into the wall, at the destruction, at the fear on the children's faces. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They will." Clara looked up at him. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. "What do we do?" Joe walked to the wall and ran his fingers over the carved letters. Then he turned back to face her. "We get ready." That night, after the children were finally asleep, Clara sat on the porch with Joe. Neither spoke for a long time. The moon was bright. The snow glittered like broken glass. "I should sell," Clara finally said. "Take whatever Crawford offers and leave." "That what you want?" "No. But maybe it's what I need to do, to keep them safe." Joe shook his head. "You leave now, Crawford wins. And men like him don't stop. They just find the next person to destroy." "So what's the alternative? Fight a man who owns the whole town?" "Yes." Clara laughed bitterly. "With what, your 6-shooter and my rusty pitchfork?" With whatever we've got, with whoever will stand with us. Nobody in that town will stand with us. You saw how they looked at me. Not everyone. Joe leaned forward. I saw a woman at the counter, older lady. She didn't look at you like the others. That's Hattie McPherson. She runs the feed store. She and Thomas were friends. Then she might help. She's one woman against Silas Crawford. Every fight starts with one person willing to stand. Joe looked at her. Right now, that person is you, and me. But maybe it doesn't have to stop there. Clara was quiet. The wind blew cold across the porch. They carved a warning into my wall, she said. In front of my children. I know. I want to make them pay for that. Then we will. She turned to look at him. In the moonlight, her eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. You really think we can win this? Joe stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. He looked out over the frozen land, the broken fence he'd fixed the barn with the patched roof. I think we're going to try, he said. And sometimes that's enough. Clara stood and walked to stand beside him. Their shoulders almost touched. 9 days, she said quietly. 9 days. That's not long. No, it isn't. She turned to face him, reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, rough against rough, cold against cold. Thank you, she whispered, for staying. Joe didn't answer. He just held on. And somewhere in the dark Montana night, hope took a single stubborn breath. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of hammering. She found Joe on the porch, nailing fresh boards over the window that Crawford's men had cracked. His breath came out in white clouds. His hands were raw from the cold. You been up all night? She asked. Couldn't sleep. That's becoming a habit. Good habits are hard to find. He drove another nail home. I reinforced the back door too, and put a bar across the barn. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter. You think they'll come back? I know they will. Crawford sent a message. When we don't leave, he'll send another one. What kind? Joe stopped hammering. He turned to look at her, and something in his eyes made her stomach drop. The kind that hurts. Inside the cabin, Ellie was crying. Clara rushed in and found her daughter sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. Mama, I had a bad dream. The loud men came back. They took Tommy away. Clara gathered her daughter into her arms. It was just a dream, baby. Tommy's right here. Nobody's taking anybody. Tommy stood in the corner watching. His face was pale. He hadn't slept either. Mama, he said quietly, I want to learn to fight. Tommy, I mean it. Joe said he'd teach me to shoot proper. But I want to learn more. I want to be able to protect us. Clara looked at her son, 8 years old, talking about fighting, talking about war. You're a child, she said. I don't feel like one. Joe appeared in the doorway. He'd heard everything. He's right, Joe said. He should know how to defend himself, how to defend his sister. He's 8 years old. I was younger than that when my father taught me. Joe walked to Tommy and crouched in front of him. Being a man isn't about age. It's about what you're willing to stand for. Tommy's chin lifted. I'm willing to stand for my family. Joe looked at Clara. She saw the question in his eyes. Every part of her wanted to say no, wanted to wrap her children in cotton and hide them from the world. But the world had already found them. Crawford had made sure of that. Teach him, she said quietly. Teach him what he needs to know. Joe nodded. He stood and put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. First lesson starts now. Get your coat. Tommy's face lit up. He ran for his coat and was out the door before Clara could change her mind. Ellie tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mama, can I learn too? Clara managed a small smile. How about you help me make breakfast instead? But I want to be strong like Tommy. You are strong, baby. Stronger than you know. Outside, Joe was showing Tommy how to hold his stance. Feet apart, weight balanced, arms loose but ready. "A fight isn't won with your fists," Joe said. "It's won here." He tapped his temple. "You think before you act. You watch your enemy. You look for weakness." What if there is no weakness? There's always a weakness. Even the biggest man has one. You just have to find it. Tommy practiced his stance. His small fists came up. Joe corrected his form gently. "Crawford's men," Tommy said. "What's their weakness?" "Fear." They didn't look scared. Bullies never do. But underneath they're cowards. They only attack when they think they'll win easy. You make it hard for them, they'll think twice. How do we make it hard? Joe picked up 2 sticks from the ground. He handed one to Tommy. "You ready to find out?" For the next hour, Joe taught Tommy the basics. How to block, how to dodge, how to use his size as an advantage instead of a weakness. Tommy was a fast learner. By the end, he was breathing hard but grinning. "I did good. You did real good. Your father would be proud." Tommy's grin faded. He looked down at the stick in his hands. "You think he's watching my pa?" Joe was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think the people we love don't ever really leave us. They're part of who we are. Every time you stand up for your family, that's him. Every time you protect your sister, that's him." Tommy's eyes glistened. He wiped his face quickly with his sleeve. "I won't let them take our home," he said. "I promise. I know you won't." They walked back toward the cabin together. Halfway there, Tommy said, "Joe." "Yeah." "When this is over, are you going to leave?" Joe stopped walking. He looked at the cabin, at the smoke rising from the chimney, at Clara's face visible through the window. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I hope you don't." Tommy's voice was small. "Ellie really likes you. And Mama? I think she smiles more when you're around." Joe didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and kept walking. By midday, they had a visitor. Clara saw the horse first, a brown mare coming fast down the road. She called for Joe, and he was at her side in seconds. "That's not Crawford's men," Joe said, studying the rider. "Wrong direction, wrong horse." As the rider got closer, Clara recognized her. "Hattie," she breathed. "Hattie McPherson." The old woman pulled her horse to a stop at the gate. Her face was red from the cold, her eyes sharp with urgency. "Clara Whitmore," she called out. "We need to talk. Now." Clara hurried to the gate. Joe followed, hand resting on his belt where his pistol sat. Hattie dismounted stiffly. She was past 60, with hands gnarled from years of hard work, but there was steel in her spine. "I heard what happened," Hattie said. "Crawford's men tearing up your place. The whole town's buzzing about it." "Let them buzz. That's not why I'm here." Hattie's eyes moved to Joe. "You the stranger who stood up to Crawford in the store?" "Yes, ma'am." "Took guts. Stupid, but guts." She turned back to Clara. "I came to tell you something. Something important." "What?" Hattie looked around, making sure they were alone. Then she lowered her voice. "Crawford's not just trying to take your ranch. He's trying to take all of them. Every small homestead in this valley. He's already got papers on 3 other families. Once he gets you, he'll control water rights to the whole territory." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know this?" "Because my late husband kept records, every deal Crawford ever made, every dirty trick he ever pulled. It's all written down in a ledger, hidden in my store." Joe stepped forward. "Why are you telling us this?" Hattie's face hardened. "Because Crawford killed my husband. Made it look like an accident. Fall from a horse, they said. But Henry never fell from a horse in his life." Her voice cracked. "I've been waiting 5 years for a chance to take that man down. And now maybe I've got one." Clara reached out and took Hattie's weathered hands. "What do you need us to do?" "The ledger proves everything. But I can't use it alone. Crawford owns the sheriff, owns the judge. I need someone with the nerve to stand up in public and expose him. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's justice. Hattie squeezed Clara's hands. Your husband was a good man. He helped Henry when no one else would. I owe the Whitmore family. This is me paying that debt. Joe spoke up. Where's the ledger now? Hidden, in the back of my store behind the false wall in the storeroom. I'll get it to you tonight, after dark. And then what? Hattie smiled grimly. Then we go to war. She mounted her horse and was gone before Clara could say another word. Clara stood frozen at the gate, her mind racing. Joe, she said quietly, this changes everything. It does. If that ledger proves what she says, if Crawford really did all those things, then he won't just fight us. He'll try to destroy us. Clara turned to face him. Are you scared? Joe met her eyes. Terrified. You don't look it. Learned to hide it, long time ago. He stepped closer. Clara, if we do this, if we go after Crawford with everything we've got, there's no going back. He'll come at us with everything he has. The men, the money, the law. Are you ready for that? Clara thought of the words carved into her wall. Thought of Ellie's tears. Thought of Tommy, with that stick in his hands, learning to fight. I've been ready, she said, since the moment he threatened my children. Joe nodded slowly. Then we do this together. Together. They shook hands, but they held on longer than necessary. And when they finally let go, something had shifted between them. Something neither of them was ready to name. That night, Hattie came as promised. She rode up to the cabin after dark, moving quiet, the leather satchel strapped across her chest. Inside was a thick ledger bound in black leather. They gathered around the small table, Clara, Joe, and Hattie, while the children slept in the corner. This is everything, Hattie said, opening the ledger. 15 years of records. Every loan Crawford made at criminal rates. Every property he seized illegally. Every payment he made to Sheriff Wells. Joe flipped through the pages. His jaw tightened. He paid the sheriff $200 last year alone. For consulting services, Hattie said bitterly. That's what it says on the books, but we all know what it really was. Clara leaned closer. There's got to be 20 families in here, all losing their land. 23. Yours would make 24. My God. Joe stopped on one page. His finger traced a name. Daniel McCready, he read aloud. Lost 40 acres. Cause of death, accidental shooting. That wasn't accidental, Hattie said. Dan tried to fight back. Stood up at a town meeting and called Crawford a thief. Week later, he was dead. Hunting accident, they said. Clara felt sick. How has nobody stopped him? Because everyone's scared. Because he owns everything. The bank, the store, the saloon, the sheriff. Who are people going to complain to? Joe closed the ledger. We need someone with authority. Someone outside Crawford's pocket. There's no one. Yes, there is. Joe's eyes were hard. The territory marshal. His office is in Helena, 3 days' ride. Hattie shook her head. That's too long. Crawford will know something's happening. He'll come for us before help arrives. Then we stall him. How? Joe looked at Clara. How much money have you got? Real money hidden away. $18. It's all I have left. Give him 10. Tell him it's a good faith payment. Tell him you're working on getting the rest. He won't believe me. He doesn't have to believe you. He just has to doubt. Buy us time. 3 days. That's all we need. Clara's hands were shaking. And if it doesn't work, then we fight. Right here. With whatever we've got. The room went quiet. Then Hattie spoke. I've got a shotgun in my store. And I know 3 other families who've lost people to Crawford. They're scared, but they're angry too. If we give them a reason to stand up. Will they? Only one way to find out. Joe stood. Tomorrow, I ride to Helena. Hattie, you talk to those families. Clara, you keep Crawford busy. Play nice. Make him think you're breaking. I don't know if I can pretend that well. You don't have to pretend. Joe's voice was gentle. Just let him see what he wants to see. A scared woman on the edge. He'll be so busy gloating he won't notice the knife at his back. Clara nodded slowly. 3 days. 3 days. Hattie gathered her ledger and headed for the door. She paused at the threshold. Clara, she said, your husband would be proud. What you're doing, it's what he would have done. Then she was gone. Clara stood by the window, watching Hattie disappear into the darkness. Joe, she said without turning, what if the marshal doesn't help? What if he's bought too? Then we're on our own. We're already on our own. Joe moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. No, he said quietly. Not anymore. Clara turned to face him. In the dim light, she could see the lines of his face, the sadness, the strength. I need to tell you something, she said, before you go tomorrow. What? She took a breath. When Thomas died, I swore I'd never let another man close. Not to me. Not to my children. It was safer that way. Less to lose. Clara. Let me finish. She reached up and touched his face. Her fingers brushed the stubble on his jaw. These past days, you've changed something in me. Something I thought was gone forever. Joe caught her hand in his, held it against his cheek. I don't know what tomorrow brings, he said. I don't know if I'll make it back, but I want you to know. He stopped. What? I haven't felt this way in 8 years. Since before the fire. Since before I lost everything. His voice dropped to a whisper. You make me feel like maybe I'm allowed to hope again. Clara's eyes burned with tears. Joe. I know the timing's wrong. I know we're in the middle of a war. But if something happens if I don't come back, don't say that. I have to, because if I don't and then I'm gone, you'll never know. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead against hers. I'm not asking for anything, he said. No promises, no commitments. Just let me come back. Let me see this through. And when it's over, if we're both still standing, we'll talk about what comes next. Yeah, we'll talk. They stood there in the darkness, breathing the same air. And for one perfect moment, the fear and the cold and the danger all fell away. Then Ellie cried out in her sleep. Clara stepped back. The moment broke. I should check on her. Go. I'll keep watch. Clara moved toward the bed. At the doorway to the small room, she paused. Joe? Yeah. Come back. That's an order. He smiled. The first real smile she'd seen on his face. Yes, ma'am. The next morning, Joe was gone before sunrise. Clara found a note on the table weighted down with a stone. 3 days. Hold the line. She folded the note and tucked it into the pocket of her apron. Pressed her hand against it like a talisman. Tommy was the first to wake. Where's Joe? He had to go somewhere. He'll be back. Promise. Clara looked at her son. At those 2 old eyes that had seen too much. I promise. By noon, Crawford's men returned. There were 4 of them this time. They rode up to the gate slow and arrogant, spreading out in a line like they owned the place already. The leader was a big man with a scar across his cheek. Clara had seen him in town once, Crawford's enforcer, the one who did the dirty work. Mrs. Whitmore, he called out. Mr. Crawford would like a word. Clara stepped onto the porch. She'd hidden the children in the root cellar behind the cabin, told them not to come out no matter what. So talk. In person. He wants you to come to town. And if I don't, the man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Then we've been authorized to encourage you. Clara felt her heart pounding. Her hand went to the pocket of her apron. Felt the note there. Joe's words. Hold the line. "I have a good faith payment for Mr. Crawford," she said. $10, to show I'm serious about settling my debt. The man's eyebrows rose. That's a start. "It's all I have right now, but I'm working on getting more. Tell Mr. Crawford to give me a little more time." "How much time?" "A week. That's not up to me." "Then take my money and my message. Let Crawford decide." The man considered. Then he dismounted and walked toward the porch. Clara forced herself not to step back. "The money," he said, holding out his hand. Clara reached into her apron and pulled out the small pouch of coins. She dropped it into his palm. He weighed it, nodded. "I'll tell him, but if he says no, then I guess I'll see you again." "You don't want that, ma'am. Trust me." He mounted his horse and signaled to the others. They turned and rode off, disappearing over the hill. Clara waited until they were gone. Then she ran to the root cellar and threw open the doors. Tommy and Ellie stared up at her faces, pale in the dim light. "Are they gone, Mama?" "They're gone." "Did you give them the money?" "I did." "Did it work?" Clara pulled her children into her arms and held them tight. "I don't know, baby. I don't know." 2 more days passed. No word from Crawford. No sign of his men. The silence was almost worse than the threats. Clara kept the children close. She taught Ellie how to start a fire with flint and steel. She watched Tommy practice his fighting stances behind the barn. She cooked what little food they had and rationed it carefully, and she waited. On the night before Joe was supposed to return, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch, wrapped in every blanket she owned, watching the stars. "Please," she whispered to the sky. "Please let him be okay." A rustle in the darkness. Clara's hand went to the rifle beside her. "Who's there?" "Just me." A figure emerged from the shadows. Young, male, hands raised. "I ain't armed, ma'am. Please don't shoot." "Who are you?" The figure stepped into the moonlight. He was young, early 20s at most, wearing a deputy's badge on his coat. "Name's Marcus Holt. I'm the deputy in Elkhorn." Clara's grip on the rifle tightened. "Crawford's deputy." "No, ma'am. The territory's deputy. I answer to the marshal, not the sheriff." "Then why are you here?" Marcus lowered his hands slowly. "Because a man came through Helena 2 days ago. Told the marshal everything. About Crawford, about the ledger, about what's been happening out here." Clara's heart stopped. "Joe, is he—" "He's fine. He's riding back with the marshal now. They'll be here by tomorrow afternoon." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "Thank God! Thank God!" "Ma'am, I need to warn you. Crawford knows something's happening. His men have been riding all over the territory. He's planning something big." "What kind of something?" "I don't know, but I heard him talking to the sheriff. He said if he can't have this land, nobody will." The words hung in the cold air. Clara stood. "He's going to burn us out." "That's what I'm thinking." "When?" "Tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, before the marshal can get here." Clara's mind raced. The children, the cabin, everything they had. "I need to get my family out." "I can help. I've got a wagon hidden about a mile south. I can take you somewhere safe until this is over." Clara started toward the door, then stopped. "Why are you helping us? Crawford could kill you for this." Marcus Holt's young face hardened. "Because my father lost his ranch to Crawford 5 years ago. Hung himself in the barn 2 months later." He met her eyes. "Some debts you pay with your life. This is me paying mine." Clara reached out and gripped his arm. "Get the wagon. We'll be ready." She ran inside and shook the children awake. "Tommy, Ellie, get up, now." "Mama?" "What's happening?" "We have to go, right now." Tommy's eyes went wide. "The bad men?" "Yes, but someone's here to help. A good man. He's going to take us somewhere safe." Ellie was crying. What about Mr. Joe? He's coming. He'll find us. Promise. Clara pulled her daughter close. I promise. She gathered what little they had. Clothes, food, Thomas's old Bible, the letters he'd written her during their courtship. Everything else would have to stay. They were at the door when she heard it. Hoofbeats, lots of them, coming fast. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face white. Too late, he said. They're here. Clara grabbed the rifle and pushed the children behind her. Tommy, take your sister, out the back, now. Mama, I'm not leaving you. Do what I say. Tommy's face crumbled, but he grabbed Ellie's hand and pulled her toward the back door. Ellie was sobbing, reaching for her mother. Mama! Mama! Go, baby. I'll find you, I promise. Marcus drew his pistol. How many rounds you got? 6 in the rifle, maybe 10 more in the drawer. That won't be enough. It'll have to be. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Clara heard men dismounting. Boots crunching on frozen ground. Then a voice she recognized. Mrs. Whitmore, Silas Crawford. Clara's blood went cold. I know you're in there, Crawford called out. I see the light. I see the smoke. Come out now, and maybe we can still talk like civilized people. Marcus moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. 8 men, maybe 9, all armed. Can we hold them? Not for long. Clara's hands were shaking, but she forced her voice steady. Then we hold them as long as we can. She moved to the door and cracked it open, just enough to see Crawford standing in the yard surrounded by his men. Torches flickered in the darkness. There she is, Crawford said, smiling that oily smile. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. What do you want, Crawford? What I've always wanted, your land, your signature on the deed. And then you can walk away, take your children, start over somewhere else. And if I refuse? Crawford's smile faded. Then I'll take what's mine anyway, and you won't be walking anywhere. Clara felt Marcus move up behind her. There's a deputy here, she called out. A territory deputy. You touch me, and the marshal will hang you. Crawford laughed. The marshal is 3 days away. A lot can happen in 3 days. He's closer than you think. Something flickered in Crawford's eyes. Doubt. Just for a second. You're bluffing. Am I? Crawford studied her face. Then he turned to his men. Burn the barn. No. Clara lunged forward, but Marcus grabbed her arm. Don't. That's what he wants. 2 men ran toward the barn with torches. Clara watched helplessly as flames licked up the dry wood. Within seconds, the whole structure was ablaze. That's just the beginning, Crawford said. The house is next. Unless you sign. Clara's heart was breaking. The barn Thomas built with his own hands. The animals inside. Everything. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. There's a difference. Crawford stepped closer. Last chance, Mrs. Whitmore. Sign the deed or watch everything burn, including those pretty little children of yours. Something inside Clara snapped. She raised the rifle and aimed it directly at Crawford's chest. You come near my children, and I will put a bullet through your heart. Crawford froze. His men raised their weapons. You shoot me, they shoot you. And then they find your children anyway. Maybe. But you'll still be dead. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the crackling of the burning barn. Then Crawford smiled. You've got spirit. I'll give you that. Your husband had spirit too. Didn't save him. My husband died of sickness. Did he? Crawford's smile widened. Pneumonia, wasn't it? Came on real sudden, real convenient. Clara's blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband was getting in my way, organizing the other ranchers, talking about fighting back, and then poof, he gets sick, dies in a week. I didn't do anything, just encouraged nature to take its course. A little something in the water supply. Nothing that could be traced. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. You killed him. You killed Thomas. I solved a problem. Same as I'm solving you. Clara saw red. Every rational thought fled her mind. All she wanted was to pull that trigger and watch Crawford die. Marcus's hand closed over hers. Don't, he whispered. Not like this. We need him alive to stand trial. He killed my husband. And he'll pay. I swear to you he'll pay. But not this way. Clara's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the rifle. Tears streamed down her face. He killed Thomas. He killed my Thomas. I know. I know. Behind them a voice screamed, high and terrified. Ellie. Clara spun around. Two of Crawford's men had circled the house. They had Tommy on his knees, arms twisted behind his back, and one of them was holding Ellie by the hair. Mama. Mama. Help. Clara dropped the rifle. No. No, please. Crawford walked up behind her. Now. Where were we? Let them go. Please. I'll sign anything. I'll give you everything. Just let them go. I knew you'd see reason. Crawford pulled a folded paper from his coat. Sign here, and this all ends. Clara's hands were numb as she took the paper. She couldn't read the words through her tears. I need a pen. Crawford handed her one. Right there, at the bottom. Clara looked at the paper, at Crawford, at her children terrified and crying. She had no choice. She started to sign, and then she heard it. Hoofbeats, coming fast, lots of them. Crawford's head snapped up. What the? Over the ridge a group of riders appeared, at least a dozen. Leading them was a man in a long coat, a silver star gleaming on his chest. And beside him, riding hard, was Joe. Marshal! Marcus shouted. Over here! Crawford's face went white. No, that's not possible. He couldn't have. Drop your weapons. The marshal's voice boomed across the yard. All of you! Now! Crawford's men hesitated. Some of them started backing toward their horses. Stand your ground! Crawford screamed. I'll double your pay, triple it. But his men weren't stupid. They could count. They could see the rifles pointed at them. One by one they dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The man holding Ellie released her. She ran screaming toward Clara, who caught her and held her tight. Mama, Mama, I was so scared. I know, baby. I know. It's over now. Tommy scrambled to his feet and ran to them. Clara pulled both children into her arms. Joe was off his horse before it stopped moving. He ran toward them, eyes wild with fear. Clara, are you? We're okay. We're okay. He reached them and dropped to his knees, pulling all three of them into his arms. Clara felt his heart pounding against hers. I thought I was too late. I saw the fire and I thought, you came. That's all that matters. The marshal was giving orders. Crawford's men were being disarmed and lined up. Deputies moved through the yard, taking control. But Crawford himself stood frozen, staring at the scene with disbelief. This isn't over, he said. I own this town. I own the sheriff. You can't. The marshal walked up to him, slow and deliberate. Silas Crawford, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, arson, and murder. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. Murder. You can't prove. We have a ledger. 15 years of records. Every dirty deal you ever made. The marshal smiled grimly. You're going to hang Crawford, and I'm going to watch. Crawford's face contorted with rage. He spun toward Clara. You did this. You and that drifter. I'll kill you. I'll kill your whole. Joe stepped between them. His fist connected with Crawford's jaw with a crack that echoed across the yard. Crawford went down hard. That's for Thomas Whitmore, Joe said quietly. And that's for his family. The marshal's men hauled Crawford to his feet. Blood dripped from his split lip. Get him out of here, the marshal ordered. And someone put out that fire before it spreads. Men rushed toward the burning barn. Others dragged Crawford toward the horses. Clara stood in the middle of the chaos, holding her children, watching her enemy being led away. It was over. It was finally over. Joe turned to face her. His face was bruised from the hard ride. His clothes were dusty. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "You came back," she whispered. "Told you I would." "I thought when I saw the fire I thought you might be too late." "So did I." He reached out and touched her face, wiped away a tear with his thumb. "But I made a promise. And I don't break promises. Not anymore." Clara leaned into his hand, closed her eyes. "He killed Thomas. Crawford, he admitted it. Poison in the water." Joe's jaw tightened. "I heard. All this time, I thought it was just bad luck, just sickness. But it was him. It was always him. He'll pay for it. I swear to you he'll pay." Tommy tugged at Joe's coat. "Is the bad man going to jail?" Joe knelt down to the boy's level. "Yeah, partner. He's going to jail, and he's never coming out." "Good." Tommy's face was fierce. "He hurt my mama. He hurt our home." "I know. But you protected your sister. You did good. I tried to fight them, but there were too many. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive. You did that. You kept your family safe until help came." Tommy's eyes welled with tears. "I was scared." "That's okay. Being scared means you're smart enough to know the danger." Joe pulled the boy into a hug. "I'm proud of you, Tommy. Your father would be too." Ellie wiggled free from Clara's arms and threw herself at Joe. "Mr. Joe, you came back. I knew you would. I prayed every night, and you came back." Joe caught her and lifted her up. "You prayed for me. Every night. I told God to keep you safe and bring you home." "Home?" Ellie nodded seriously. "This is your home now. You're staying, right?" Joe looked at Clara over Ellie's head. The question hung in the air between them. Clara reached out and took his free hand. "Right," she said softly. "He's staying." The marshal approached, his face weathered but kind. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Marshal John Barrett. I need to take your statement about what happened here tonight." "Of course. It can wait until morning if you need rest." "No, I want it done. I want it all on record." Clara squeezed Joe's hand. "Everything Crawford did, everything he said, especially about my husband. Joe told me about the ledger. Mrs. McPherson is already on her way to Helena with it. It's going to put a lot of men in prison." "Good." Barrett looked at the smoldering remains of the barn. "I'm sorry about your property. We'll do what we can to help rebuild. It's just a barn. It can be replaced." Clara looked at her children, at Joe. "Some things can't." The marshal nodded. "Get some rest tonight. We'll talk in the morning." He walked away to supervise his men. Clara turned to survey the damage. The barn was a total loss. The fence was broken in several places. The yard was churned up by horses and boots. But the house was standing. Her children were safe. And the man who had haunted her for 3 years was finally in chains. "Mama," Ellie's voice was small. "Is Christmas still coming?" Clara looked at her daughter. Despite everything, the fear, the fire, the violence, Ellie's first thought was Christmas. "Yes, baby. Christmas is still coming. Even though the barn burned." "Even though." Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. "Christmas doesn't need a barn. It just needs family." Ellie smiled. "Then we have lots of Christmas, because we have lots of family now." She looked at Joe when she said it. Clara felt her heart expand. "Yes," she said quietly. "We do." They went inside. The cabin was untouched, messy from the earlier panic, but intact. Clara set about making coffee while Joe checked on the animals. Somehow old Bess the cow had escaped the barn before the fire. She was wandering in the yard, confused but unharmed. Tommy helped herd her into a makeshift shelter behind the house. He worked without complaint, exhausted but determined. "He's a good kid," Joe said when he came back inside. "He's his father's son." "He's his mother's son, too," got her courage, her stubbornness. Clara smiled faintly. "That stubbornness almost got us killed." "No, that stubbornness saved your family. If you'd given in to Crawford a year ago, you wouldn't be standing here. You'd be gone and he'd own everything." "I never thought of it that way." "Start." Joe moved closer. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Clara Whitmore. Don't let anyone tell you different." They stood there in the dim lamplight close enough to touch. "Joe." "Yeah." "What Crawford said, about you making me smile more, about the children liking you." She took a breath. "He was right." "That's so. I've been alone for 3 years, taking care of everything by myself, and then you showed up and, I don't know, things felt different. Good different. Terrifying different." She laughed softly. "But also good. Very good." Joe reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know we've got a lot of rebuilding to do. But Clara—" He paused, searching for words. "I meant what I said before I left. About wanting to stay. About finding something worth staying for." "And you still feel that way, after everything that's happened?" "More than ever." Clara's eyes glistened. "I'm scared, Joe. I've already lost one man I loved. I don't know if I can survive losing another." Joe's hand cupped her face. "I can't promise I won't die. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay. Every day. For as long as you'll have me." "What if that's a long time?" "Then I'll fight a long time." Clara closed the distance between them. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative. A question more than an answer. Joe pulled her closer and kissed her back. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Mama!" They sprang apart. Tommy was standing in the doorway, eyes wide. "Tommy, I thought you were outside. I came to get water." He looked from his mother to Joe and back again. "Were you kissing?" Clara's face went red. We... Tommy's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then a small smile crept across his face. "Good. About time." He grabbed the water bucket and walked back outside. Clara and Joe stared after him. "Did he just—" Joe started. "I think he did." They looked at each other and burst out laughing. Real laughter. The kind that comes from exhaustion and relief and joy, all tangled together. "Your son is something else," Joe said. "He takes after his father." "I think he takes after his mother." Ellie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Why is everyone laughing?" Clara crossed to her daughter and scooped her up. "Because we're happy, baby. Because the bad man is gone, and we're all together, and everything is going to be okay. Promise." Clara looked at Joe over her daughter's head. "I promise." The next morning, Hattie McPherson arrived with 3 wagons full of supplies. Behind her came more wagons, and more. Families from all over the territory, people Clara had never even met, bringing food, blankets, tools, lumber. "What is all this?" Clara asked, stunned. Hattie climbed down from her wagon, her old face creased with satisfaction. "Word travels fast in Montana. When people heard what you did standing up to Crawford, helping to bring him down, they wanted to help. But I didn't do anything. It was Joe who rode to Helena. It was you who had the ledger. You held the line." Hattie gripped Clara's hands. "You refused to break when he tried to break you. That's what gave everyone else the courage to stand up." A man approached, weathered, gray-bearded hat in his hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, my name's Samuel Crane. Crawford took my ranch 4 years ago. Cost me everything." His eyes were wet. "I just wanted to thank you. For fighting when the rest of us couldn't." More people came forward. Men and women who had lost homes, land, family members to Crawford's greed. They shook Clara's hand, hugged her, thanked her. By noon, the yard was full of people working. Men were framing a new barn. Women were organizing food and supplies. Children, including Tommy and Ellie, were running around laughing and playing. Joe stood beside Clara, watching it all. "This is what community looks like," he said quietly. "When people come together instead of tearing each other apart." I'd forgotten what it felt like. So had I. He put his arm around her shoulders. "But I'm starting to remember." Clara leaned into him. "Joe." "Yeah. It's Christmas Eve tomorrow." "I know. I don't have presents for the children. No money for a tree. Nothing special planned." Joe smiled. "Look around you." Clara looked. At the people working together. At the children playing. At the wagons full of supplies and the skeleton of a new barn already taking shape. "This is the present," Joe said. "All of this. The people. The hope. The future." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "How did I get so lucky?" "You weren't lucky. You fought. And you won." He kissed the top of her head. "That's not luck. That's strength." That evening, as the workers headed home with promises to return, Clara sat on the porch with her children. Tommy was whittling a stick with his father's old knife. Ellie was playing with a rag doll one of the women had given her. "Mama," Ellie said. "Yes, baby. Is tomorrow really Christmas?" "Yes, it is." "Even though Santa might not know where we are," Clara smiled. "Santa always knows." "But our chimney has a crack. What if he gets stuck?" Joe appeared around the corner of the house, arms full of firewood. "Santa won't get stuck," he said. "I fixed that chimney 2 days ago." Ellie's face lit up. "You did?" "Sure did. Good as new." "Then Santa can come." "He can." Ellie jumped up and ran to Joe, throwing her arms around his legs. "Thank you, Mr. Joe. Thank you. Thank you." Joe set down the wood and lifted her up. "You're welcome, little miss." Tommy looked up from his whittling. "Joe." "Yeah. That thing you taught me, about being brave and being scared at the same time." "What about it?" "I thought about it a lot, when the bad men came." Tommy's voice was quiet but steady. "And I think I understand now." "What do you understand?" "Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified." He met Joe's eyes. "That's what you did. What Mama did. What we all did." Joe set Ellie down and walked over to Tommy. He crouched beside the boy. "You're going to be a good man, Tommy Whitmore. A real good man. Like my pa. Like your pa. And like yourself." Tommy didn't say anything, but he reached out and hugged Joe. Tight and fierce. Joe held him back. Clara watched from the porch, tears streaming down her face. This was her family now, broken and rebuilt, scarred and healed, bound not by blood but by something stronger, by choice, by love, by the stubborn refusal to give up. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Joe sitting on the porch looking at the stars. She sat down beside him. "Clear night," she said. "Cold, too. You should come inside. In a minute." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About Sarah and Daniel, my wife, my son." Clara reached for his hand. "For 8 years I ran from their memory. Couldn't face it. Couldn't stay anywhere that reminded me of what I lost. And now," Joe looked at her, "now I think they'd want me to stop running, to find a new family, to live again." He paused. "I think they'd like you, Clara, and your kids." "I hope so. I know so." He squeezed her hand. "Sarah used to say that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes, grows into something new." She sounds wise. She was. Wiser than me, that's for sure. He smiled sadly. I'll never forget them. But I don't think I'm supposed to. I think I'm supposed to carry them with me and build something new at the same time. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. I'd like to help you build that something. Yeah. They sat there together watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow was Christmas, and for the first time in years, Clara believed in miracles again. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of silence that only comes after a storm. Clara woke first. For a moment, she lay still listening to the quiet breathing of her children. Then she remembered. The fire. The arrest. Joe. She sat up quickly and looked toward the window. He was there, sitting on the porch. She could see the shape of him through the frost-covered glass. She pulled a blanket around her shoulders and stepped outside. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. Joe turned. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he was smiling. "Merry Christmas. You've been out here all night." "Most of it. Couldn't sleep. Bad dreams. Good ones, actually. That's what scared me." Clara sat down beside him. "You're allowed to have good dreams, Joe." "I know. It's just been a while." He looked out at the yard, the half-built barn, the wagons from yesterday still parked near the fence. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, that none of this is real." "It's real. I know. But sometimes the good things feel more like dreams than the nightmares." Clara reached over and took his hand. His fingers were cold. She wrapped both her hands around his and held tight. "Feel that?" "Yeah. That's real. I'm real. The children are real. This," she gestured at the ranch, at everything around them, "is real. And it's yours now too, if you want it." Joe was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I've never wanted anything more." The cabin door burst open, and Ellie came running out, still in her nightgown, feet bare on the frozen porch. "It's Christmas! It's Christmas! Mama, is Santa here? Did he come?" Clara laughed and scooped up her daughter. "Get inside before you freeze, child." "But I want to see if Santa came." "He came," Joe said. He stood and pulled something from behind the woodpile, a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "He left this for you." Ellie's eyes went wide. "For me. For you." She grabbed the package and tore it open. Inside was a small wooden horse carved by hand, painted white. "It looks like Ghost," Ellie squealed. "Mama, look. It looks just like Mr. Joe's horse." Clara looked at Joe. "When did you—" "Last night. Couldn't sleep, remember?" He shrugged. "Figured I'd do something useful." Ellie threw her arms around Joe's legs. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, I love it. I'm going to name him Little Ghost, and he's going to be best friends with the real Ghost, and they're going to have adventures." Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's all the noise?" "Santa came." Ellie held up her wooden horse. "Look what he brought me." Tommy's face fell slightly. He tried to hide it, but Clara saw. Joe saw too. "Hold on there, partner." Joe reached behind the woodpile again and pulled out a second bundle. "Santa left something for you too." Tommy took the package slowly, like he didn't quite believe it. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a knife. Not a toy, a real knife with a bone handle and a leather sheath. Tommy stared at it. "That was mine," Joe said quietly. "When I was about your age, my father gave it to me. Taught me to whittle with it, to clean fish, to survive." He paused. "I reckon you're old enough to have it now." Tommy's hands were shaking. "You're giving this to me. Your father's knife." "I am. But this is important. This is from your family." Joe knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. "Tommy, listen to me. My family is gone. I carried that knife for 20 years, and every time I looked at it, I remembered what I lost." He put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. "But now when you carry it, maybe it'll remind you of what you have, what we all have, together." Tommy's lip trembled. He threw himself at Joe, wrapping his arms around him. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." Joe held him tight. Clara watched tears streaming down her face. "Mama's crying again," Ellie observed. "These are happy tears, baby." "Happy tears are weird." Clara laughed through her sobs. "Yes, they are." After breakfast, a real breakfast with eggs and bacon from the supplies Hattie had brought there, was a knock at the door. Clara opened it to find the marshal standing there, hat in hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, Merry Christmas." "Marshal Barrett, I wasn't expecting you." "Apologies for the intrusion. I have news, and I thought you'd want to hear it right away." Clara's stomach tightened. "What kind of news?" "Crawford's been talking. All night long, trying to cut a deal." Barrett's weathered face split into a grim smile. "He's confessed to everything. The fraud, the extortion, the murders including your husband's. It's all on record now." Clara gripped the doorframe. "He confessed to killing Thomas?" "In writing. Signed and witnessed." Barrett reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. "This is a copy. For your records. For your children when they're old enough." Clara took the paper with trembling hands. "Why would he confess?" "He thinks it'll save him from hanging. It won't, but he's desperate enough to try anything." Joe appeared behind Clara. "When's the trial?" 2 weeks. Helena. You'll all be called to testify." Barrett looked at Clara. "I know it won't bring your husband back, but at least there'll be justice." "Justice." Clara's voice was hollow. "Is that enough?" "No, ma'am. It never is." Barrett put his hat back on. "But it's a start, and sometimes a start is all we get." He tipped his hat and walked back to his horse. Clara stood in the doorway, staring at the confession in her hands. Joe put his arm around her. "You okay?" "I don't know. I thought I'd feel something. Relief. Satisfaction. But I just feel empty." "That's grief. It doesn't go away just because you get answers." "Will it ever go away?" "No. But it changes. Gets softer around the edges. Makes room for other things." Clara turned to look at him. "What kinds of things?" "Joy. Hope. Love." He touched her face. "The kind of things that make the grief worth carrying." She leaned into him and closed her eyes. "I'm glad you're here, Joe." "Me too." By noon, the yard was full again. Families had come from miles around, the same ones who'd helped yesterday, plus others who'd heard the news about Crawford. They brought food. They brought music. They brought the kind of raucous, messy joy that only comes from people who've survived something together. Hattie McPherson stood by the food table directing traffic like a general. "You there, put those pies over here. And you don't even think about touching that ham until everyone's served." Clara found her and hugged her tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet." Hattie's eyes twinkled. "Wait till you see what's coming down the road." "What do you mean?" Hattie pointed toward the horizon. A wagon was approaching, a big one pulled by 4 horses. As it got closer, Clara could see it was loaded with lumber tools and what looked like... "Is that a stove?" "Brand new, cast iron, from my store." Hattie grinned. "Consider it a Christmas present, and a thank you, and an apology for every time I should have stood up to Crawford and didn't." Clara's mouth fell open. "Hattie, I can't accept." "You can and you will. Don't argue with an old woman on Christmas." The wagon pulled into the yard, and men immediately started unloading. Within an hour, the new stove was being installed in the cabin, replacing the rusted, cracked one that had barely functioned for years. Ellie watched the installation with wide eyes. "Mama, the new stove is so shiny." "It is, isn't it?" "Can we cook lots of food now?" "We can cook all the food you want." "Can we make pie?" "We can make pie." "Can we make 2 pies?" Clara laughed. "We can make 100 pies if you want." Tommy stood outside watching the men work on the barn frame. Deputy Marcus Holt had joined them, stripped down to his shirt sleeves despite the cold, swinging a hammer with practiced efficiency. You're pretty good at that, Tommy said. Marcus grinned. My pa was a carpenter before he turned to ranching. Taught me everything. Could you teach me? Sure. Come on. Marcus handed Tommy a smaller hammer. Start with these nails, straight and true like your pa would have done. Tommy took the hammer like it was made of gold. He started working face set with concentration. Joe found Clara watching them. He's a natural, Joe said. He's his father's son. He's more than that now. He's becoming his own man. Clara leaned against Joe. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for all of this to fall apart. Maybe it won't. Things always fall apart. Not always. Sometimes they fall together. He gestured at the yard, the people working, the children playing, the sound of laughter and hammering and life. Look around you. This is what together looks like. Clara looked, really looked, and for the first time in 3 years, she believed it. Late in the afternoon, the work stopped and the celebration began. Someone had brought a fiddle. Someone else had a harmonica. Before long, music filled the yard, and people were dancing clumsy, joyful dancing that didn't care about skill or form. Ellie tugged at Joe's hand. Dance with me, Mr. Joe. I don't know how to dance. I don't either. We cannot know together. Joe looked at Clara helplessly. She grinned. You heard the lady. He let Ellie drag him into the crowd. She stood on his boots and held his hands, and they shuffled around in a circle while she giggled uncontrollably. Tommy stood at the edge of the dancing watching with a small smile. Clara walked over to him. You could dance too, you know. Dancing's for girls. Your father loved to dance. Tommy's head snapped up. He did. He was terrible at it. 2 left feet. But he'd grab me and spin me around the kitchen, and we'd laugh until we couldn't breathe. Her voice caught. Those are some of my favorite memories. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Maybe I'll try it. Someday. No rush. She put her arm around him. But if you ever want to, I'll teach you, the same way your father taught me. Tommy leaned into her. I miss him, Mama. I know, baby. I miss him too. But it's okay to be happy, right? Even though he's gone. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. It's more than okay. It's what he would have wanted. He loved us so much, he would never want us to spend our lives being sad. Do you think he can see us from heaven? Clara looked up at the sky, pale and endless. I think he can, and I think he's smiling. As the sun began to set, the crowd slowly dispersed. Families loaded onto wagons, calling out goodbyes and promises to return. The music faded. The yard grew quiet. But the warmth remained. Hattie was the last to leave. She stopped at her wagon and turned back to Clara. You did good, girl. Thomas would be proud. Thank you, Hattie, for everything. Don't mention it. Hattie climbed onto her wagon, then paused. That man of yours, Joe. What about him? He's a good one. Don't let him get away. I don't intend to. Hattie smiled. Good, because men like that don't come around often, and when they do, you hold on tight. She flicked the reins and was gone. Clara turned to find Joe standing behind her, Ellie asleep in his arms, and Tommy drowsing against his side. Help me get them inside. Of course. They carried the children to bed, tucking them under the new quilts that someone had brought. Ellie murmured in her sleep, clutching her wooden horse. Tommy's hand rested on his new knife, still in its sheath. Clara stood looking at them for a long moment. They look peaceful, Joe said quietly. They are. For the first time in a long time. So are you. Clara turned to face him. I don't know what I am. Happy, scared, grateful, all of it at once. That sounds about right. They walked out onto the porch. The stars were coming out bright and cold against the darkening sky. Joe. Yeah. I need to tell you something. He waited. Clara took a deep breath. When Thomas died, I thought I'd never love again. I thought my heart was used up, spent. There was nothing left. She paused. I was wrong. Joe's expression shifted. Something raw and vulnerable flickered across his face. Clara. Let me finish. She stepped closer to him. These past weeks, you showing up, staying fighting for us, you've shown me what I'd forgotten. That love isn't something you use up. It's something that grows, changes, finds new ways to exist. I feel the same way. I know you do. I can see it. She reached up and touched his face. Joe Brennan. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll have 20 years or 20 days. But I know I want to spend whatever time we have together, building something, growing something, being a family. Joe's voice was rough. Are you asking me to stay? I'm asking you to marry me. The words hung in the cold air. Joe stared at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. You want to marry me? Yes. Clara, I'm a drifter. I've got nothing. No money, no land, no... You have us. You have a home. You have children who love you, and a woman who... She stopped, swallowed. A woman who loves you, if you'll have her. Joe's eyes glistened. I've spent 8 years running, he said slowly. 8 years trying to outrun the ghosts, trying to forget what I lost. He took her hands in his. And then I rode past your ranch, saw your daughter at the fence, heard her ask if Santa was late. And something inside me just... stopped. Stopped. The running, the fear, all of it. He pulled her closer. I didn't come here looking for a family. I didn't come here looking for love. But I found both, and now you're asking if I'll stay. He laughed softly. Clara, I'd walk through fire to stay. Is that a yes? That's a yes. 1,000 times yes. She kissed him, hard and deep, pouring everything she had into it. All the fear and hope and love that had been building since the moment he'd first ridden up to her broken fence. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. So, Joe said, a grin spreading across his face. I guess this means I'm going to be a father again. That's exactly what it means. And a husband. Yes. And a rancher. Well, you've already been doing the work. Might as well have the title. Joe laughed, full and free, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep. God, I love you, Clara Whitmore. I love you too, Joe Brennan. Inside the cabin, a small voice called out, Mama, Mr. Joe, are you coming inside? They turned to see Ellie standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. What are you doing out of bed, sweetheart? I heard laughing. I wanted to see what was funny. Clara crouched down. Mr. Joe and I were just talking about the future. What about the future? Well, Clara looked at Joe. How would you feel if Mr. Joe stayed with us forever? Ellie's eyes went wide. Forever, 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 forever. Like a papa. Clara's heart clenched. Yes, baby. Like a papa. Ellie was quiet for a long moment. Then her face split into the biggest grin Clara had ever seen. I knew it! She ran to Joe and threw her arms around his legs. I knew Santa would answer my wish. Joe scooped her up. What wish was that? I wished for Mama to stop crying, and for someone to fix our house, and for a papa who would stay and never leave. She beamed at him. Santa sent you. Joe's voice was thick. I guess he did. Tommy appeared in the doorway. His face was guarded, uncertain. Tommy? Clara said gently. Did you hear? Yeah, I heard. He looked at Joe. You're really staying. If that's okay with you. Tommy was quiet. Then he walked forward slowly, stopping in front of Joe. "My pa was a good man," Tommy said. "The best man I ever knew." "I know. Your mama told me. He'd want us to be happy. He'd want Mama to have someone to help her, to protect her." Tommy's jaw tightened. "But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't leave. Not ever. No matter what happens." Joe set Ellie down and knelt in front of Tommy. "Thomas James Whitmore, I promise you on everything I am and everything I have, I will not leave this family. I will protect you and your sister and your mother with my life. I will stay through the hard times and the good times. I will be here every single day for as long as I live." Tommy's eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for weakness, for lies. He found none. "Okay," Tommy said finally, and then for the first time since Joe had arrived, he smiled. "Welcome to the family, Joe." He threw his arms around Joe's neck. Joe held him tight. Clara gathered Ellie into her arms and joined them, and for a long moment the four of them stood there on the porch, wrapped around each other, holding on like they'd never let go. When they finally broke apart, Ellie was crying. "Why are you crying, baby?" "Because I'm happy." She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Happy tears are still weird, but I like them now." They all laughed. The sound echoed across the quiet yard, rising up toward the stars. Later, after the children were back in bed, this time truly asleep, Clara and Joe sat together by the new stove. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "For what?" "For coming. For staying. For giving my children a father again." She paused. "For giving me hope. You gave me the same thing. I guess we're even then. I guess we are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance behind the iron grate. "Joe?" "Yeah. What do you think Sarah would say about all this?" Joe was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I think she'd say it's about damn time." He smiled sadly. "She always told me I wasn't meant to be alone, that I had too much love to give to waste it on ghosts." He looked at Clara. "I think she'd like you. A lot. I wish I could have met her. In a way you will. Through me. Through the person she helped me become." He took Clara's hand. "She's part of who I am. Always will be. Just like Thomas is part of who you are. We're a pair of ghosts ourselves, aren't we? Maybe, but we're also alive. And that's what matters." He squeezed her hand. "The dead don't want us to join them. They want us to live, really live, for their sake and ours." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Merry Christmas, Joe." "Merry Christmas, Clara." Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the yard in white, covering the new barn frame, covering the fence that Joe had fixed, covering everything in a blanket of peace. And inside the little cabin on Bitter Creek Ranch, a family slept. Not broken, not lost, not alone, but found. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of coffee. Joe was already up, moving quietly around the cabin. The children were still asleep, curled together under their quilts. "Morning," he said, handing her a cup. "Morning." She took a sip. "You're up early." "Old habits." He sat down beside her. "I was thinking." "About what?" "About the barn, and the fence, and everything else that needs doing." He grinned. "I've got a lot of work ahead of me." "We've got a lot of work ahead of us." "Us. Yeah." He said the word like he was tasting it. "I like that." Clara smiled. "Get used to it." Ellie stirred, yawned, and sat up. Her hair was a wild tangle, and her eyes were still half closed. "Is it still Christmas?" "Christmas is over, baby, but the day after Christmas is pretty good too." "Why?" "Because we get to start building our new life." Ellie considered this. "Can I help?" "Absolutely." "Can Little Ghost help too?" Clara laughed. "Little Ghost can definitely help." Tommy woke next, stretching and grumbling like he always did in the morning. But when he saw Joe sitting at the table, his face softened. "You're still here." "I'm still here." "Good." Tommy climbed out of bed and walked to the table. "What's for breakfast?" "Whatever you want," Clara said. "We've got eggs. We've got bacon. We've got more food than we've had in months." "Can we have everything?" "We can have everything." They ate together, the four of them crowded around the small table. Ellie talked non-stop about her wooden horse and her plans for its adventures. Tommy ate silently but steadily, like he was making up for all the meals he'd missed. Clara and Joe kept catching each other's eyes across the table, sharing small smiles. It was messy. It was loud. It was chaotic. It was perfect. After breakfast, Joe pushed back from the table. "All right, time to get to work." He looked at Tommy. "You coming, partner?" Tommy's face lit up. "Really? Really? I need someone to hand me nails while I work on the barn. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Then let's go." They headed outside together, Tommy practically bouncing with excitement. Ellie tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Mama, can I go too? You want to help with the barn?" "No, I want to watch and give advice." Clara laughed. "Advice? I'm very good at advice." "All right, bundle up first." A few minutes later, Clara stood on the porch watching her family. Joe and Tommy were working side by side on the barn frame. Tommy handed nails with careful precision, and Joe praised him for each one. Ellie sat on an upturned bucket wrapped in blankets, offering a running commentary on their progress. "You missed a spot." "I got it, Ellie." "Are you sure it looks wobbly?" "It's not wobbly." "It looks a little wobbly." Joe laughed and shook his head. "You're going to be trouble when you grow up, you know that." "I know." Ellie beamed. "Mama says I'm already trouble." Clara smiled and hugged herself against the cold. This was her family now. Not the one she'd started with, not the one she'd planned, but the one she'd been given, the one she'd fought for, the one she'd earned. Joe looked up and caught her watching. He smiled, that quiet, steady smile that had become her anchor in the storm. She smiled back. And in that moment, standing on the porch of her little cabin surrounded by the people she loved, Clara Whitmore finally let go of the past. Not because she'd forgotten it, not because it didn't matter, but because the future mattered more. The barn would be rebuilt, the ranch would prosper, the children would grow, and through it all, Joe would be there, steady, strong, hers. Some people spend their whole lives looking for home. Clara had found hers in the most unlikely place, in a broken ranch, in a brutal winter, in the arms of a stranger who'd become something more. She'd found it in the courage of her son, learning to be a man. She'd found it in the hope of her daughter never giving up on miracles. She'd found it in the love of a wanderer who'd finally stopped running. And she'd found it in herself, in the stubborn, fierce, unbreakable heart that had refused to surrender. Some stories end with riding off into the sunset. But the best stories, the real stories, end with staying, with building, with choosing to love even when love is terrifying. Clara Whitmore had chosen, and in the end, that choice had given her everything: a home, a family, a future, and a love that would last forever. Not because fate had decreed it, not because someone had saved her, but because she had saved herself, and in doing so had found a partner willing to walk beside her for the rest of their days. That was the truth no story could capture in full. That was the gift no Christmas could match. And that was the ending Clara Whitmore had earned, not happily ever after, but something better. Something real. Something worth fighting for. Something that would endure. In the end, the little girl had asked if Santa was late. But Santa hadn't been late at all. He'd just taken a different form, a lone cowboy on a pale horse carrying nothing but heartache and hope. And when he'd found the family that needed him, he'd stayed. Not for a night, not for a season, forever. That was the miracle of Christmas, That was the promise of love. And that was the story of how one broken family became whole again, not through magic, not through luck, but through the simple, stubborn choice to keep believing, to keep fighting, to keep hoping. Even when hope seemed foolish, even when the odds were impossible, even when the world said no. Because in the end, hope was all they had. And hope, it turned out, was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.